Hi everyone, this video is going to introduce dividing a whole number by a decimal. Let's start out with 3 divided by 6/10. So I want to first do an estimate so that I have a way to compare my answer to see if it's reasonable. So I'm going to keep 3 as 3 and I'm going to round 6/10 to 5/10 because that's like 1/2. So if I have 3 pieces and I split each of them into half, then I will end up having 6 pieces. So this is my estimate that I'm going to compare my actual answer to whenever I'm finished. To use base 10 grids, we want to start out, this equals 1 whole here, and so if I'm taking 3 wholes, I'm going to identify my 3 wholes here, and I'm going to make groups of 6/10. So I'm going to count off 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there's my first group of 6/10, and I'm going to label that group number 1. Then I'm going to make another group of 6/10, and I'm going to continue doing that until I can't make any more groups. So these 6/10 make up group number 2. I'm going to count off another group of 6/10, and that's going to be my group number 3, and then I'll continue doing that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's my 4th group of 6/10, and then finally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this helps me to see that if I'm taking 3 wholes and I'm breaking it into smaller groups, such as 6/10, that I'm going to end up with more groups than what I started with. So 3 divided by 6/10, as you can see, would be 5. And if I compare that to my estimate, that gives me a reasonable answer. I can also check my work with multiplication by saying 5 times 6/10 would give me 30/10, which is the same as 3 wholes. So let's take a look at one more problem where we're not dividing by tenths, but we're going to divide by hundredths. So let's look at 2 divided by 25 hundredths. So again, I want to start out with a smart estimate. So I'm going to do 2 divided by 5/10, which is also 1/2, because that's also an easy number for me to work with, and 25 hundredths is close to a half. So if I have 2 wholes and I split them into half, then I'm going to end up with 4 total parts, so that'll be my estimate. And again, I'm going to use base 10 grids as my strategy. So I'm going to mark off my 2 wholes that I'm going to be using, and this time I'm going to be making groups of 5/10. So groups of 25 hundredths. That's my estimate. So I'm going to make groups of 25 hundredths. So here's 2/10, and then I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hundredths, and I'm going to mark that off there, and then make my group. That's group number 1. I can use these 5 hundredths for my next group, plus 2 more tenths there. So that gives me a second group of 25 hundredths. So I'll continue with that same strategy, marking off groups of 25 hundredths. And then I can use those 5 hundredths and those 2 tenths. So what I want to look at here and point out is that out of 1 whole, I was able to make 4 groups of 25 hundredths. So I can use my math knowledge and think, well, if I can get 4 groups out of this whole, then I must be able to get 4 groups out of this whole. So I can go ahead and say that I can get 4 groups there. So 4 groups here plus 4 groups out of this second whole will give me a total of 8 groups. So 2 divided by 25 hundredths is 8. And if I compare that to my estimate, okay, 8 is not too far from 4, but because I rounded up quite a bit, that's why we see a bigger difference in our actual answer and in our estimate. So this is one strategy that we can use to divide a whole number by a decimal is by using base 10 grids. And also pointing out that when you divide a whole number by a decimal, you're going to get a larger number than what you started with. Again, we can check this with multiplication. 8 times 25 hundredths would give us 2 wholes.